There are stories that start quietly, like the soft hum of a neon sign flickering over a foggy roadside diner, and then erupt into unforgettable lessons that stay etched in the mind long after the tale fades to silence. Today's story is exactly that kind. A gripping, cinematic encounter between a legendary old cowboy whose presence alone could silence a room, and a loudmouthed diner bully whose ego was far bigger than his sense. This is a clash of generations, of humility versus arrogance, of quiet strength versus empty swagger. And like all the best modern Western-style encounters, it takes place not in the vast desert plains, not on dusty main streets at high noon, but right inside a worn, chrome-trimmed diner off Highway 74, where a single bad decision sets everything in motion. You're about to read how a bully made the biggest mistake of his day, maybe even his life. When he decided to steal Clint Eastwood's seat, mock him in front of a crowd, and treat him like he was nothing but an old man past his prime. But what the bully didn't know, what he couldn't have known, is that you never humiliate a legend. Because legends don't shout. They don't boast. They don't threaten. They simply act. And this story, dear reader, will remind you exactly why Clint Eastwood's name still sends a chill down the spine. Now sit back, relax, and prepare for a slow-burn explosion of tension, humiliation, instant regret, and justice served cold. If you enjoy stories like this, remember to like the video and subscribe for more. The rain had just started when Clint Eastwood pushed open the door of Ray's roadside diner. It wasn't much, just a narrow building with a peeling sign and the smell of old coffee soaked into the walls, but it was the kind of place where Clint could sit without being recognized too much. And besides, he liked diners. Always had. He stepped inside, shook the water off his coat, and nodded politely at the waitress behind the counter. "Mornin', Clint," she said with a warm, worn-out smile. "Mornin'. My usual seat free?" "Sure is. Booth by the window." Clint headed over, easing himself into the seat he'd sat in 100 times before. It gave him a perfect view of the rain outside and the highway stretching into the distance. The quiet. The familiarity. That's what he liked. But peace never lasts long, not in stories like this. The bell above the door clanged loudly, announcing trouble before it even walked in. A group of 3 men stepped inside, loud, laughing, shoulders wide like they owned the place. Their leader, if he could be called that, was a thick-necked man in his early 30s. Muscular enough to intimidate, loud enough to annoy, and arrogant enough to ruin everyone else's morning. His name was Brock Garrison. Locals knew him. Most avoided him. The second his eyes swept the diner, he spotted Clint sitting alone. "Hey," Brock said, elbowing his buddies. "Check out Grandpa over there." They laughed, the kind of forced laughter only insecure men make. Brock sauntered across the diner floor and stopped at Clint's table. "That's a nice booth you got there," he said. Clint didn't look up immediately. He took his time. Calm. Slow. Then his eyes raised just enough to meet Brock's. "Glad you think so," Clint said gently, then went back to reading the menu. Brock wasn't used to being ignored. "I wasn't given a compliment, old man," he growled. "I want the seat." Clint's fingers lightly tapped the menu. "Well," Clint murmured, "seems to me there are other seats." "Plenty of M." "Yeah," Brock said, leaning closer, "but I want this one." The diner grew tense. A fork clattered somewhere in the back. Clint let out a long breath, calm as a man settling into a rocking chair. "Son, I'm too old for games. Go sit somewhere else." The wrong sentence for the wrong man. Brock smirked, then suddenly reached across the table, grabbed Clint's coffee mug, and dumped it onto the floor. "That clear enough for you, Grandpa?" Silence. Cold, sharp silence. Clint looked down at the spilled coffee drifting across the tiles. He wasn't angry. He didn't even frown. But his eyes changed, only slightly, like the tightening of clouds before a storm. He slid out of his booth with slow, precise movements. "Fine," Clint said softly. "You want the seat? Take the seat." Brock grinned victoriously. He turned to his buddies, puffing himself up. "See that? Even legends know when to step aside." Laughter erupted. Clint stepped away from the table, but only halfway. He rested one hand lightly on the counter, waiting. Brock dropped himself into the booth with exaggerated arrogance, stretching out his arms across the backrest as if claiming territory. "Someone bring me a menu," he shouted. The waitress didn't move. Her eyes were flicking between Brock and Clint with dread. "You heard me," Brock snapped. "Get your legs moving." Clint sighed. "It ain't polite," he said softly, "to talk to a lady that way." Brock turned sharply. "Did you not hear me tell you to get lost?" "Oh, I heard." Clint's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "But see, you made a big mistake." Brock laughed, mocking. "Oh yeah? And what's that?" Clint stepped forward, lifting two fingers and pointing them like a gun, slowly, deliberately, toward Brock's chest. "You sat in a man's seat," Clint said. "Without earning it." The room froze. Brock blinked. "What the hell's that supposed to mean?" "It means you ain't fit for it." Clint turned to walk away, calmly, casually, when Brock made his final mistake. "Hey! I ain't scared of no washed-up cowboy." Clint stopped walking. The waitress quietly whispered, "Oh no." Clint turned back again, this time fully, and stepped toward the booth. Brock shifted slightly, confused by Clint's expression. It wasn't anger. It wasn't intimidation. It was disappointment. "Son," Clint said, voice low and gravelly, "if you're gonna take a man's seat, at least take a seat you can handle." "What's that supposed to mean?" Brock scoffed, trying to laugh, but something in Clint's eyes made the sound die in his throat. Clint reached down, and with a sudden, startling motion, dragged the entire booth table, a heavy slab of wood and steel, across the floor with one hand. It screeched loudly, making Brock jump as the table slammed into his ribs, pinning him back. The entire diner gasped. "You think strength is in your arms," Clint said. "But strength is in your discipline." Brock tried to push the table away. It didn't budge. Clint leaned in. "How's the seat feel now?" Brock's pride shattered. He struggled, panicked. His buddies hesitated, none wanting to intervene. Finally Clint stepped back and let Brock scramble out, red-faced, humiliated, breathless. I was just messing around," Brock muttered. "You humiliated yourself," Clint said. "I didn't do a thing." The bully stood frozen, embarrassed beyond repair. Clint straightened his coat, reclaimed the booth, and sat back down, calmly. Exactly where he belonged. Brock Garrison stood in the middle of Ray's roadside diner, chest heaving, face burning red, ego shattered like glass under a boot heel. Where moments earlier he'd strutted like an untouchable king, he now looked like a kid caught doing something stupid, frozen in front of the entire diner. Clint Eastwood simply sat back in his booth, reclaimed his seat, and poured himself a new cup of coffee as if nothing had happened at all. Not a single person made a sound. Even the rain tapping against the window seemed to go quiet for a moment. Brock's two friends, men who usually joined him in his bullying, avoided his eyes. They weren't stepping in. They weren't helping him save face. They were slowly shrinking back toward the door, almost embarrassed to be seen standing next to him. The waitress stepped forward timidly, placing a fresh mug on the table in front of Clint. "Here you go, hon." "Thank you," Clint replied, giving her a gentle nod. It was a small act, but in the silent diner, it might as well have been a gavel striking wood. Brock swallowed hard. His pride wanted him to retaliate, but his instincts weren't so sure anymore. Something about the way Clint had moved that table, effortlessly, casually, stuck in his mind. Brock was strong, yes, but that table took 2 grown men to lift usually. And this old man had slid it with one hand. Brock forced a laugh that came out choked. Whatever. I ain't scared of you. Clint didn't respond. He didn't even glance his direction. That somehow made it worse. Brock's jaw clenched. The humiliation felt like fire burning under his skin. His whole life, he'd built his reputation on one rule. Never let anybody make you look weak. And right now, he'd never looked weaker. He stepped forward again. I said. Clint raised one finger without looking up. A single, subtle motion. It was enough to stop Brock mid-sentence. Son, Clint said quietly, don't dig your grave deeper than you already have. A murmur passed through the diner. Brock trembled with indecision. Fight? Run? Yell? Pretend he didn't care. But before he could decide, the diner door swung open again with a sudden, violent bang. 3 men walked in, bigger, rougher, meaner than Brock or any of his friends. Leather jackets. Boots heavy with road dust. Knuckles scarred. Men who looked like they lifted motorcycles for fun. At the sight of them, Brock's face went pale. Their leader, a tall, bald man with a jagged scar across his jaw, smirked. There you are, Brock. Been looking for you. The bully swallowed hard. Hey, Hunter. I was gonna call you. Hunter stepped closer. You owe me money. The entire diner tensed again. Clint slowly lifted his eyes. You boys mind talking business like that outside? Folks are trying to enjoy their morning. Hunter turned toward him, eyebrows rising. And who are you supposed to be? Clint took a sip of his coffee. Someone who asked politely. Hunter laughed, a loud, menacing sound that made Brock wince. Polite? Ain't nobody talked about being polite in this diner for years. Clint shrugged. Then maybe it's overdue. Hunter took a step toward Clint. You gonna make me? But before Clint could answer, Brock shocked the entire diner by stepping between them. Hunter, don't, Brock said quickly. You don't want to mess with him. Hunter's eyes widened in disbelief. You defend someone? Must be serious. Brock didn't respond. The leader turned back toward Clint and leaned over the table, palms slamming on the surface. You got a big mouth, old-timer. Clint looked at the hand on his table. I'd appreciate it, Clint said quietly, if you'd take your hand off my property. Hunter smirked. Or what? Clint didn't move. But the look in his eyes changed. Dangerous. Cold. Sharp enough to slice through bone. Last chance, Clint said. Hunter lifted his hand slowly and stepped back, putting both hands in the air in mock surrender. Look, boys, he drawled. Grandpa's got claws. His 2 friends laughed. Clint leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands folded as calmly as if he were discussing today's weather. What Brock owes you, Clint said, ain't none of my business. But this diner, and the people inside it, are under my protection. The words were simple. But the weight behind them made Hunter hesitate. Observing him quietly, Hunter narrowed his eyes. Wait. I know you. He stepped back, squinting. That face. That voice. No way. The other 2 men leaned in. Is that? Nah. Can't be. Clint simply raised an eyebrow. Hunter snapped his fingers. You're Clint Eastwood. The diner went dead silent again. Suddenly, Hunter's whole demeanor shifted. He wasn't dealing with just an old man. He was dealing with a legend he'd grown up watching. The man whose movies taught generations what real toughness looked like. And that legend had just told him to step back. Hunter swallowed. Look, no disrespect meant. Clint nodded. Good. Now take your business outside. Hunter looked at Brock, shaking, sweating, staring at the floor. This ain't over, Hunter muttered. Brock looked panicked. Hunter, please. Hunter cut him off with a sharp gesture. Not here. Outside, Clint said firmly. Don't bring trouble into this diner. Hunter clenched his jaw, looked at Clint one more time, and then motioned for his men. They stepped back, pushed open the diner door, and disappeared into the rain. The second the door shut, Brock collapsed into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. Clint took another slow sip of coffee. You owe them money, Clint said. Brock nodded weakly. Yeah. I made some mistakes. Clint sighed. We all do. Brock's voice cracked. Why'd you stop them? After how I treated you, why'd you even help me? Clint looked outside where Hunter's crew waited in the parking lot. Because, son, you ain't a bad man. Just one who forgot how to be good. Brock blinked hard, eyes burning. And right now, Clint continued, you got two choices. He raised two fingers. 1, you walk out there alone, and you pay the price for your choices. He raised the second finger. Or 2, you walk out there as a better man, one who stands up, takes responsibility, and stops hiding behind pride. Brock's voice was barely a whisper. And what happens if they try to hurt me? Clint stood up from the booth. Slowly. Calmly. Purposefully. Then, Clint said, slipping his coat on, they'll have to go through me first. The entire diner froze. Brock's eyes widened. You'd help me? After everything? Clint placed a hand on Brock's shoulder. Son, I ain't here to hold grudges. I'm here to teach you something your ego won't let you learn. Brock swallowed. What's that? That being strong, Clint said, ain't about taking seats. It's about standing for something. With that, Clint walked toward the door. Brock hesitated only a moment before following behind him, this time not with arrogance, but with humility. The diner watched as the two stepped outside into the rain. Hunter and his men straightened, cracking knuckles, ready for a fight. But the moment Clint stepped forward, calm, steady, unflinching, Hunter froze. Clint, this ain't your business, Hunter said. Clint stood firm. It is now. Hunter looked at Brock, then back at Clint, then finally lowered his fists with a frustrated growl. Fine, Hunter said. He pays me by Friday. No interest. No trouble. Brock nodded rapidly. I will. I promise. Hunter pointed a hard finger at him. You slip up, and I'll come back. Clint stepped between them. No. You won't. Hunter hesitated, then backed down. The three bikers retreated, climbed on their motorcycles, and roared away into the storm. Brock let out a breath that rattled his whole chest. Thank you, he whispered. I don't deserve it. No, you don't, Clint said. But you can earn it. Brock nodded, wiping his eyes. Clint turned to walk back inside, hand on the door, when Brock called after him. Mr. Eastwood, one more thing. Clint paused. I'm sorry. For how I treated you. For everything. Clint's expression softened, just slightly. Apology accepted. When they stepped back inside, the entire diner burst into quiet applause. Clint returned to his booth. Brock sat at a different table this time. Not because he'd been told to. But because he finally understood respect. And Clint? He simply continued drinking his coffee as the rain eased outside, just another day, another lesson taught, another young man saved from himself. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you like the video and subscribe for more amazing stories like this.